Ko te Aturangi nepia clampa hau, no te tarawhiti, no ngā iwi o runga whakata, Ngāti Porou, me kahununu. My name is Te Aturangi Nepia Clamp. I'm from Turanganui Kiwa, from the tribes of Runga Whakata, Ngāti Porou and Kahununu. We're at Heipipi Park, which is actually whenua of Runga Whakata. So this land is Runga Whakata land, maintained by the council. Heipipi Park is historically a very important historical site for Māori of this area, because it had a village here that was named Heipipi. I guess for me the whole theme of voyaging and seafaring started as a kid when I was taught at school that Captain Cook was the greatest seafarer ever, the greatest cartographer, the greatest navigator, and I was taught that our Polynesian ancestors were nothing but accidental drifters. They would go fishing from the islands in their small canoes. A storm would come up and they would get blown until they bumped into land. They couldn't make it home. So that's the story I was told. Luckily, I'd go home in the evening and my mother would say to me, "What did you learn at school today, son?" And I'd tell her. And she said, "No, that's not right." It taught me my whakapapa at a young age, my genealogy, my canoes, the waka that my ancestors came on, the horota and takitimu, and also taught me who my ancestors were and how I'm related to them. Yeah, so I guess without that lesson at school, I may not have got all of that story from my mother, so things work out. I think at that young age, something was born in me to do something in my lifetime to put the story straight, to tell the story of our Polynesian ancestors, their voyaging, incredible stories that started 7,000 years ago, and our ancestors voyaged all over the Pacific, exploring, discovering and settling islands of the Pacific. The Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean in the world. It covers 1/3 of the Earth's surface. So our ancestors were out there. In 1983, the ancestors gave me a dream, and the dream was to carve a huge canoe prow to make a statement for our voyaging ancestors. At the time I was living in Palmerston North. I had just finished carving a totem pole for the Manawatu Museum, Te Manawa, and I had this dream about the canoe prow. At the time I was sort of getting ready to go to the States to carve the first bicultural totem pole with the First Nations, which is why I had carved the Po Whenua totem pole in Palmerston North to promote that trip. So having had this dream about this huge canoe prow, I had no idea where I had to carve it. I had no idea if I could carve it, but I guess it was given to me for a reason. And so I went off to the States, carved the bicultural totem pole with a fellow American Indian artist in the States, returned to Aotearoa in 1985, and decided to come and live in Turanganui Kiwa in Gisborne. I figured as a tribal carver, I needed to be close to my people. And so as soon as I got to Gisborne, I saw all of these statues of Cook everywhere, and nothing to represent our Polynesian voyaging ancestors who were here thousands of years before anybody else. And so I started thinking again about the canoe prow and how appropriate it would be to be in the Tairawhiti in Gisborne, Turanganui Kiwa. So I started making applications for funding and so forth. But the real breakthrough came in 1990 when the government recognised the 150 years since the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, and money became available through the 1990 Commission to do projects of significance. So under the runanga, Tūrangi Nui a Kiwa, we applied for funding, and at the time I was working at social welfare as a social worker, and I managed to get a secondment to do this project, mainly through the efforts of Uncle Api Mahuika, who negotiated that, and Jackie DeCunny, who was representing our runanga Tūrangi Nui a Kiwa at the time. Yeah, so you can't do anything in this world by yourself. You need help from other people, and if something is worthy, it will prevail, I feel. And so the funding was available, and I worked with a friend of mine, Derek Lardelli, to solidify the design of the canoe prow and the appropriate whakapapa. And then the timber was donated by the runanga, Tūrangi Nui a Kiwa, and then I had to do this huge job of creating this carving to give respect to our our Polynesian voyaging ancestors. To be honest, I knew that I had to do it because I was given the dream, but I really didn't have much idea of how I could do it because I didn't know much about lamination, and I knew that I had to laminate timber together to get this size and shape. And so I was told to go and see a master timber worker who knew all about lamination. And so I did, and I spent probably half an hour telling him that I didn't know anything about lamination, him telling me that he knew everything about lamination, and then eventually telling me that it couldn't be done with the budget that I had, because the budget would be used to build a huge press to press all the timber together in order for the shape to be made. And I was like, well, I think it can be done. And he said, well, you came in here, you told me you didn't know anything about lamination. I've taught you about lamination, and now you're telling me that it can be done. And why would you do that when you admit that you know nothing about lamination? And I said, well, why would the ancestors give me the dream if it couldn't be done? To me that made complete sense, but I think to him I should have been put in Ward 11. But anyway, I prevailed, and luckily found a joiner who agreed to help me, and together we were able to put it together. So the top figure is Tangaroa, the god of the sea. Below him is Maui. Maui is known by every Polynesian island throughout the Pacific. They had their own stories about Maui, fishing up their land or discovering their land. And of course, on my Ngāti Pro side, we say that we come from Maui, so we have always been here. So we've got Maui, then we've got the middle figure, which is Toi Kairako. Toi Kairako was one of the first ancestors that voyaged down this way from the Pacific, from Rarotonga. And then we have the Takarangi, the spirals representing genealogy, representing whakapapa from the beginning of time until the current day. on the back end of the canoe prow, we have two ancestors, Te Maro and Te Rako. They were the first two ancestors that were shot and killed by Cook's men at the first meeting of those two races, and basically killed through misunderstanding. So they're represented there, and they have really determined how the Tauihu was placed, because they are looking back to the place that they were killed. Yeah, so it's a historical piece. It tells a story, as all carvings should, and it tells the story of our voyaging ancestors, and it tells the story of the local history here, and it tells the story of us populating this region in terms of the whakapapa that continues on beyond the two ancestors. Tōtara has a inclination to open up, to crack naturally as it dries, and then sometimes it closes back up. But what's happened here is that the cracks have opened up and they've stayed open, and so I think that timber is still a living being, and it sort of expands and then it condenses, expands, condenses. So at the height of summer, which is what we've got now, I've started filling in all of those cracks so that it doesn't weaken the structure, and the structure will be very strong as a result of that. Replacing the backbone of the canoe prow with a continuous piece of timber that's going to tie everything together. We didn't have that originally, and to make sure that all of the carving is taken back to bare wood as much as we can, and then it's going to be reprimed and then repainted. We're lucky that Tōtara timber was available at the time when I made this. Tōtara is an amazing timber. It has a certain resin that repels a lot of things, and right, if you have a fence post, for example, it's not uncommon to have a fence post made out of tōtara that is still good 100 years later, because of this particular makeup of this timber, which is amazing. The resin that it has to preserve itself. That's why tōtara was also very good for making canoes. Yeah, so our ancestors just instinctively knew what to use the particular timbers for. Yeah, and put them to best use. So basically, the idea is to restore the carving, which really hasn't had any major restoration work for 35 years. And so restore it as much as we can to the original and better if possible. It'll be pleasing to the heart to actually see the carving restored and in the form that it should be, in the best shape it should be. It's really important when Māori give a gift that gift is acknowledged and looked after, especially a cultural gift. And so, I'd just like to see that Māori artworks, not just this, all artworks around the city, regardless of their cultural heritage, as long as they do have a cultural heritage, should be respected and honoured and looked after. Yeah, looked after, because this is the largest canoe prow in the world. It's something that we should be proud of, I think. It's something unique, and it's something that puts Gisborne on the map, as well as all of the other wonderful artworks around the place. And this was the first public artwork, Māori public artwork in Gisborne, when it was made in 1990. And since then, there are other many beautiful sculptures, paintings, murals, installations that are just wonderful to see. And they should be here, because culturally, that is how Māori, that is how we told our stories. We didn't tell it with a pen and a paper. We told it through our artworks, and our artworks all have whakapapa, they all have genealogy, they all have a story, they all have a important message for people. Yeah.